I'm here with Ben Ivey. Ben Ivey happens to run sound for
Warren Zeiders.
Is that it?
Mm-hmm.
Any more? Anything you can tell us about the secret? Give me all your secrets right now.
Give me all the secrets.
All the secrets.
Well, I know that I don't know everything.
Okay.
And that's what I know.
Perfect. Well, thank you for having me out. We are here and you get to see my amazing hair. We're here in Atlanta. We're at the State Farm Arena. So thank you for having us. And it's gonna be a little weird because usually we're coming from this way, but we have a house behind us.
Yeah.
That apparently burns.
Yeah, it catches
rains.
on fire.
Yeah.
The tanks are right behind us. So this could be your last video.
That's fantastic. As long as we get on the camera, it's good to go. All right. Yeah. Let's hit the rewind button. Okay. Rewind me all the way back to when you were just a wee little sparkle in your dad's eye.
Okay. Yeah, so I started in audio at my church that I grew up in. My dad is a physicist by trade, and he's very into audio and science and how it actually works. And so one day he was up in the audio box, like you remember when they were like boxes and they were like in with all the analog gear everywhere. And I was like, what does this mean? And he basically told me what it meant, but he didn't know how to actually mix. He knew the theory about how all of it. And I just kind of sit there like glazed eyes and was like, oh, okay. But I kind of like this, this is kind of cool. And it was an HD 3000. So it was right before the big digital age. And it was really cool. And I learned everything about gain structure and condenser mics and how to learn how to like lead from the back, but not be noticed.
All from your dad?
All from my dad, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's pretty wild. But if you give him anything like super musical, he doesn't like this blows his mind. He has no idea what any of this means. He has an M32 now at his church and he doesn't know how to use it. So it's kind of turned, the tables have turned for sure. But that's how I got my start. And I was always the musician first. I was always the singer or guitar player or drummer or something like that. And basically, I kept realizing that everyone was way better than me at the instruments, and I just kept moving back towards the desk.
This is another failed musician.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. And I did a lot of.
Everybody's been asking me to make a failed musician shirt. I have to do this.
You really should. Yeah, you really should, because it. But the thing is, it gives us a perspective, because like, especially because I've done monitors as well a bunch, and there's nothing like knowing when a musician doesn't hear themselves, or they can't play their instrument, so then you in turn can't articulate what needs to happen out here.
Sure.
Well, and if you don't understand that, it's really hard to like have empathy for them. And so for me, like just knowing what it's like to have poorly tuned drums is a good thing to know.
Yeah.
It's a good thing, and it's a good skill set to know how to actually do them and how to keep a key on you all the time, and just know what they need, so then you can articulate whatever it is. If it's a church, if it's an arena, if it's a stadium show, if it's a big artist, whatever it is, you're able to, do your best. But a lot of those kind of ideas kind of came from like when I started. So, yeah.
Okay, so what got you into touring?
Touring, I just always wanted to do it. I always wanted to be like that person, but I realized it's very challenging to do so. And the seats aren't always open.
Yeah.
So I learned that, hey, if you want to really get great at what you do, you kind of need to have some other tools in your tool belt and kind of see what it's like, at an A level to go, well, the front of house seat isn't always open. So you might need to be the RF tech.
Yeah.
You might be the monitor guy. You might need to be the monitor tech, just to see what it's like when you actually level up. Because everybody can mix like a 4-piece wedding band. And that's fine. And there's people who do that and they're great at it. I did it for a long time, but it's different when you want to say, all right, I want to level up. How do I do that? And then you kind of have to start the process of doing so. And it's challenging, and it hits your pride a lot too.
Yeah.
Because you're like, no, I'm the front of house guy. Well, yeah, I know I am, but on this tour, I'm not. And so kind of having to swallow that pill and then be like, all right, what am I here to do today? And then you can start to level up. People recognize, hey, like you're actually really good at this. Or, hey, I think this is the role for you for this tour or something like that.
It's interesting. I did another interview with a girl named Abigail, and she got her tour job from one of the local laborer, because the local laborer off tour worked for local labor, and he liked the way that
That's
she
awesome.
worked on tour, so she got it in reverse from them. And it's like, it just goes to show that, like, never underestimate who is what and where they're at, and always just do what you do with excellence no matter where you're at. You're never better than the RF guy. You're never better than the local labor person. We're all kind of doing a job, but what does it mean to actually have excellence in everything you do? Because that transcends through everything. But it is a little bit of a pride hit, though, when you're doing something else. It's like, I'm used to being here, and I'm used to actually having to delegate to it. Now I'm having to be delegated from, and if I was in that position, I would rather
Yeah, or you start criticizing everything you're doing.
Yeah.
Or you're like, oh yeah, I don't want to lay 100 feet of feeder. Like, that sucks. But I've also know what it means, and I know how to do it.
Yeah.
So it's good to kind of have those kind of experiences, so then it just makes you that much better. And Abby's a good friend of mine, and she's a great engineer, and she's exactly right. Like, that's such a great method, because that's how I got my first big stadium gig in Atlanta, when right after Mercedes-Benz opened. And it was literally like, one day somebody didn't do the timing right on the system, and it was all echoey, and everybody didn't know what was going on. There was all these delays, and I said, hey guys, you guys didn't time align the PA. They're like, what do you mean we time align? I was like, no, you didn't. And I had to walk up and do it, and then the guy said, you're gone, you're up. And I was like, oh no. Yeah, like, what do I do now? You know what I mean? And it was wild, but it was one of those things where, like, you have to stay ready.
Yeah.
Because you never know when you're going to have to step in. Someone might have a family member staying on a tour, and you're the guy who knows the desk, and you got to pony up.
The biggest question I get typically is, how do I get started, and how do I get in this industry? And everybody says networking, but there's really something to be said about just getting in and getting involved, no matter where it's at, no matter if it's local labor, or I wouldn't say hang outside the venue, but I mean, if you can, but just being in and around it, and understanding the lingo, understanding how the networking actually works. And that's not necessarily always like changing numbers. It's actually being able to, and I say it's really, there's that right place, right time.
Oh, yeah.
But there's that third thing I think people miss is having the ability to give people what they need at that time as well.
Absolutely. That's what people need on tour. I mean, they hire experts to come on tour. They don't necessarily do that in a general random arena show. You know, they're hiring a general hand. So you being there with an audio focus, if you impress those people, they're going to remember you. They're going to know. They're going to be like, yeah, that's the guy that's always on time, or that's the guy that really helped me with my drums, or that's the guy that just said something super nice to me one time, and I remembered what that felt like.
Yeah.
You know, and I always wanted to be that guy. So if I was the best house person, I could be that person. Or if I just needed to be the best, like, hey, whatever you need, man, I'm here. You know, whatever that looks like. If it's just making sure he's got water, or he's got this or that or the other, they're comfortable.
Yeah.
You know, because at the end of the day, like, we all want to do this, and we all want to be great at it, but it's a whole nother thing to do it all the time.
Yeah.
Like, every single day.
I think it's something to be said too as well, and there's a little bit of correlation to being a headline on a tour, to being a direct support, to being a buy-on. Talk to me a little bit, because right on this tour you are direct support for Jelly Roll. Talk to me a little bit about that relationship and your operating parameters of working for. You're supporting Jelly Roll.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a huge thing. The first thing is that it's not your show. Like, it's not. If they say they want to take a little bit longer, if they have to work on this, you have to say yes. Because at the end of the day, it's their name on the marquee first. It's not ours. The second thing is that anything to do to make their life easier, the more that I can do on my advancing in the planning helps them. So, for example, for this tour, there's 20 trucks, and it's insane. There's lots of things. So we need to be as self-contained as possible. So we made sure we had our own power distro. We made sure we had our own engineers. We had our own consoles. We had everything. So I literally get 2 things from them every day. I get fiber lines, and I get PA, and that's it. And that's a great way to be a direct support at. It's a great way to communicate with them and to know what they need. Or, hey, hands are late. I need you guys to step up today.
Yeah.
Or, hey, you know, we're running a bit behind. Anything you can do to help us. Just being there, like, just like the first thing we talked about, like, it directly correlates to being a great support act. Being there, being available, and then just communicating as much as humanly
Yes.
possible.
I think for me too was like it was being easy to work with
Yeah.
as well. And then also a little trick which I do is like try to be off deck early.
Yeah.
Always, never have them waiting on you because they remember that type of stuff, and it's easier to get other gigs when they know that you're also easy to work with, especially in this
100%.
industry. It's such a tight-knit community. Once you get something like a bad reputation, it's so much harder to get through that than it is
Oh,
to
for sure.
a good reputation.
For sure. And the first thing you do usually when you're a direct support act is that you got to meet the stage manager, and you kind of have to learn what they want, what they like. Like, hey, can we get up on deck at the same time? Is that okay? Is it not? Do I need to prep? Do I need to get all my risers in order so then we can just go right up on stage? Like anything to make their day better, you do. And we have that with these guys because they're amazing. We've worked with them a lot of the year. But the best part is that we don't have to talk about that anymore. They tell me 3 things every day. What time I can unload my truck, what time I can get on deck. And then everything else is about shooting the shit. Like everything else is totally secondary. It's like, what's your favorite beer? What's this? And now we can actually learn each other.
Yeah.
And it makes everything easier.
So you're also in an interesting spot too with I think one of the hardest things to learn, especially with going to a venue this size, is low end and being able to mix in somewhere that this is this big.
Yeah.
Talk to me about some of the challenges that maybe you came into coming into something of this size, or maybe something you still maybe kind of deal with a little bit because they've been used to doing this for a long time.
Oh yeah.
And it's really, honestly, it's hard going from a club or going from a theater to something like this. And a lot of times you're really having to make up for stuff that you have no clue or just didn't understand.
Oh, for sure. The biggest thing is I think I did a lot of hip hop.
Okay.
And so I learned a lot about like if you don't have low end, you have nothing. And knowing to have good like warm low end, but not like piercing your eardrum kind of thing. And so learning how to manipulate that, but then also knowing your act really well makes a huge, huge difference. So like, for example, a lot of country music nowadays, it has a lot more low end than it used to.
Yeah.
And some artists don't. So it kind of depends, and you have to kind of find that sound.
Yeah.
And so I listen to their records all the time. I print a board tape every single day. I'm making sure that the quality of what we're getting is very, very consistent.
Yeah.
But the other thing too is like,
Alex, how we looking on deck?
everyone wants to be in the hot seat until they're in
the
it.
hot seat.
Yeah, because I was always a guy like, I want to be there. I want to do that. I'm worth it. I can do it. And then when you make the walk back to the front of house before the show starts, it's like, all right,
I got all the multi-pans.
you ready? You know, like it's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
You know, and so being ready for that and then realizing, hey, it's a privilege to sit here. It's hard to sit here.
Yeah.
And I gotta be on my game.
Well, the tough thing at least for me too, was like the tools that I was used to using weren't as effective in an area of this caliber, i.e. reverb.
Yeah.
Your normal low end that you do, it can just escape away from you. And if you don't understand what you're walking into. But the cool thing is, I think there's been a big shift in the industry of people are more approachable and people still want to answer questions.
Absolutely.
And once COVID happened, a lot of the old timers hung up their hats. And I think we talked about before kind of coming up in the industry. I think you may have seen this as much as I did. There was definitely those people that I looked up to that I didn't want to be because they treated
100%.
me like crap. There was gatekeeping with it, even being as a local person. It's like, I don't want that. It was tough going through that. I did learn a lot from it, but also now that I'm here, how do we pay it forward to somebody else, and how do we maybe take down the curtain a little bit? So I'm trying to do this channel of like, this is an unfiltered look into this.
Sure.
It's hard. It's challenging. You can get there, and there is avenues to get there, but understand as you advance, it does get a little tough. And there's a bunch of cool tools and resources that we have to be able to do that. But if you don't understand the basics and the concepts of this, you're going to be kind of lost.
Oh yeah, you'll sink or swim really quick. But the biggest thing, like I've said this all year, that something I've had to really look at, because at least in country music right now, if you're with an artist that's doing this, you're going to be in a club, a theater, a church, a stadium, a ballroom, outdoor event, festival, throw and go. You're in a different thing every day. You're in a different PA every day, and you have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And so for me, like having tools like a lake, huge difference. Having tools like knowing where my meters are going to sit. because this is a brand new PA. We hadn't heard it till this tour.
Yeah.
So we were all learning it, calling out frequencies to each other, like trying to be on the same team. But I knew for a fact if I looked at my meters and I said, hey, this is supposed to hit minus 18 and it's not, what is the problem? Is it here? Is it something else? Is it the PA? Is it the room? What is it?
Okay, so now talk to me that balance from using your eyes and using your ears, because there's a bunch of really cool tools. I've done that. I speak from experience because I've done this to where I'm so used to how that looks.
Yeah.
And I get so focused here that I have to like, okay, screw all this. How's it sound?
Oh yeah.
So how do you balance that from like, okay, I kind of look at it and see it as like a reference, as like a pilot that like, okay, this seems weird. Let me use this as a reference. But at the same time, how do you balance that when both seem off?
Yeah, so for me, I have a group layer on my desk that has kind of solved that for me. So I have an all music bus and then I have an all vocal bus, because the idea is that they came to hear him sing, not the guitar player.
Yeah.
It's the visual for me alone. Now, it doesn't mean that there's not solos, there's not pushes, there's not huge snare hits and all that stuff, but it's vocal and the rest, always. Always. And if you can't hear that, feel that in every single section, I'm not doing my job right. And I really want them to be able to communicate that way, because that's how I listen to music. So like if I can't hear the vocal, it's really hard for me to get into it. And especially with this type of music where it's vocal forward, like,
Yeah.
let it be what it is. And the other thing too is if your artist has a certain type of sound, we're supposed to steward that and cultivate that. So like in this band, for example, there's a lot of guitars and it's very bright. I'm not used to mixing that bright. But at the show 3 of this year, I was like, it's supposed to be bright.
Yeah.
It's supposed to sound that way. Now, how do I carve out those lanes? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no. It
Because that
absolutely
was
does.
a huge thing for me. I have to be like, okay, like, it's badass guitars, they rip, but I gotta have that vocal there and I gotta have the snare cracking because it's still a rock show. But that's if you know the music, if you know your meters, if you know what you're supposed to do, all of this becomes easier.
I think you're so key on the listening to, because the artists and the musicians spend a bunch of time, especially in the studio, sonically, how do I want it to sound and where do I want things to fit with that? And so we're supposed to be able to cultivate what that and repeat what that is. But also we got a bunch of different dynamics that the studio doesn't necessarily have.
Absolutely.
So how do I replicate that to the best of my ability? And then also maybe do I put a little bit of my own little flair onto it as well? But that's also a tricky point to where like there's a point to when you come to work for an artist, you are replicating, and it's not your job to put flair onto this.
Absolutely.
Until you get to a certain caliber of like, you know, the Pooches and the Tobys and all of them, to where it's like, I mean, even them though, it's still.
Well, they have trust.
Yeah.
That's what they have. And then they have the credits to back it up.
Yeah.
So even though I do have some cool credits, like my artist is younger, and it's great in a way because he doesn't know. And so it's my job to be the expert to support him. So if I say, hey man, if you want consistency in your intermix, we should have the same desk every time. We should do these things in order to get you the show that you want. And it's having to explain that to them in a way that where they don't feel dumb, where you can you say that you're on their side, but then also like, hey, let's do this in a budgetary way.
That's such a tough balance, especially when you're new with
It's
it. Like,
crazy.
how do you talk to an artist in the way that you're not demeaning and you're not talking down to, and how do you, it's that whole communication. Okay, so what's your advice to engineers that are maybe with the band or they're new with the band, they haven't figured out that balance of being able to talk to an artist, or what's that time that you're like, okay, I want to help us step forward with my experience, but there's still that new, but what you were just talking about before, like how do you find and navigate that, especially with a newer band? Do you wait a certain amount of time, or do you just...
Well, I think time is key, and then your approach is everything. Because so many guys will go, hey, this is how it's always been done, and this is how we should do it. Well, every case is different. You know, if you don't have money, you have to be a good steward of what you have there. So if you say, hey, we're a band in the box, we're an M32 budget, how can we make it better?
Yeah.
Well, let's pick the best sources we can. So let's pick the best mic package we can. Let's do this. Okay, well, you're in a stadium now. You got to have the best RF in the world, because that's really difficult to have bad RF in stadiums. You know, you have to major on those majors and then give them value for it.
Yeah.
Explain it to them plainly, and then put numbers to it. Because if you don't do that, then they might not have an extra $500. You know, like you have to create that value for that. And if you don't give it to them plainly, it's never going to work. And I've experienced that. Like I've experienced that with artists that were like, didn't understand what a talkback mic was and why it was so important or why we needed extra inputs. Yeah. But that's why we're trusted to do what we do. And then you have to have a track record of that as well.
I think it's part of that too. Like choose which hills you also want to die on.
Absolutely.
As well. I'm gonna throw a hypothetical at you.
Okay.
You're getting ready for a show. You got 30 seconds till downbeat. Console crashes, lose everything. You guys start from scratch. Where do you go?
Vocal.
Okay.
They can't hit if vocal first always.
Okay. What do? You got 30 seconds till that downbeat hits.
I will make sure everything's connected. I'll hit my high pass filter. Start there.
Everything?
And I do my sure cuts. I learned that from an old buddy.
Okay, what's the sure cuts? Tell me about that.
So for me, I learned the sure cuts were, depending on your vocal range, anywhere from 150 to like 189 is where you start on your high pass filter, no matter what.
Okay.
Some guys will take it to the extreme, but I start always there. And then I go to typically 232 and then 432. And I do a big old cut at both of those things. And if it's a female singer, I might massage the top end just a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I usually will look at the meters to see where I'm going. And I'll set a compressor to a limit, not to compress. And then I use something else for the multi. That's the first three things I do. Because if I have a really dynamic singer, that's what you have to do. You don't have a choice. But if you can't hear the vocal, people will get disinterested, and it goes back to what I said earlier.
Yes.
So, but if you can at least hear stuff, they go, oh, that's kind of weird, but I can, okay, yeah, like and then you can fix the drums, and then you can fix the guitars, and then you can fix everything else. You know, sorry, keyboards are probably last.
Sorry, keyboards.
Even though I do a keys forward mix, but yeah, vocal always, no matter what.
What's the coolest trick you've learned recently?
Ooh. No trick, but I would say adding specific gear that has been really, really fun. Like
specific gear.
So 2 things for me this year that I've added is a Neve Shelford EQ and a Ferrofish A to D converter.
Okay.
The reason that was so great for me is I had done everything analog into my desk before, and I ran out of ins and outs. And I figured out a way to do everything via MADI, run parallel paths, and then keep all those open. And then I picked pieces that were really, really good, and then I gave them a really good reason of why we should have them. Like, hey, this is for your vocal. We should try it. Oh, you like how that sounds? You can have that in Model World too. Boom. Easy.
I like how you suggested, but you also gave reason behind it, not just, hey, I want to try this. So there's actually some sort of like, I want this because of this, and I think it'll add value because of this, not just because I want to try some stuff.
Yeah, and like you can do that to an extent with somebody and just go, oh yeah, what the hell? Let's try a new snare top mic. But at the same time, if it works, it works. And if you have time to test it out and then show them your work, it's a really easy way to say yes. Yeah. But if you don't take the time to do that, if you do it very braggadociously, if you do it very like
braggadocious, I like that.
oh, I know what I'm doing. It's like, well, yeah, I do know what I'm doing most of the time, but sometimes I am just trying this out. Like, or a friend says, hey, have you ever thought about doing this? I'm like, you know what? I have never thought of that. Yeah. I'm going to try this, and being willing to be okay with that. But then knowing who you're working for.
Yeah.
What's
the best piece of advice you've gotten from one of your mentors?
Ooh. Be a better human. It's really hard to tour with people who suck. It just is. And if you care about the little things, the big things come easier. But if you're a bad person, no one wants to work with you, you're not going to get hired.
Yeah.
There was a guy a long time ago that used to be such a jerk. Great engineer, such a jerk. And they posted on a forum one time about needing to do something and why they weren't getting work. And I said, brother, it's because you're a jerk. Sorry, it's just because you're a jerk. That's why people aren't working you.
Did you receive it?
Yeah, private messaged me and said, oh my gosh, what did I do wrong? And I was like, dude, you're a douche. I'm sorry. Like,
because it's not too easy to work with.
Yeah, it really does. And it's sad that it's like some things that seem so simple to others, but some people Some people's personalities are different.
Yeah.
You know, like most of my team's not morning people, so running in, screaming into the green room is a bad idea.
Yeah.
You know, but people skills do help a lot.
I did my interview with Phil Bledsoe. He said, well, what was it like? I get paid for an hour and a half. I'm hired for the 22 and a half hours.
Yeah,
That's
that's wise. That's exactly
Meaning that
it.
that other portion is actually why you're hired, not just this specific.
Absolutely. Like your talent will get you so far, but who you are will carry you. Like it's about your character. It's about your bus etiquette. It's about how you just treat people normally, like the janitor that's in your way and your load in, to your artist walking through and you stop and you wait, you know? But if you don't have that perspective, one, nowadays, like you said, because a lot of the older generation's gone, they don't put up with it anymore. They'll just send you home. They'll say, hey, sorry, bud, we're gone. And they just will. And it sucks, but it's the truth.
Those moments suck, but you definitely learn from those. I've had those moments. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've done both sides of the snake. You've done monitors and you've done front of house. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about has doing monitors affected how you mix front of house at all? And if so, why?
It definitely has. The biggest thing I learned was gain structure and learning how to get the best source at the very start before it gets to me back here. That was a huge thing. I learned about mic placement. I learned about how to mic a drum set. I learned, what's the difference between a dynamic mic, a condenser mic, and all these different things that I need to get a certain sound or to replicate a certain thing every day. I learned it from doing that and being the patch guy and being the monitor tech and being all those other roles before I really sat there. Like, but of course, in a smaller respect, like you're the audio guy and you're just doing everything. Well, then you learn a little bit of all of that. But learning it at an expert level and trying to get really, really good at it, it was back there.
Okay, so gain staging is something so simple to say. Talk to me a little bit about the importance of gain staging and why that's so important.
Well, it's how you build your mix, for one. I mean, if your meters aren't right, it's going to either look weird, sound weird, or feel weird. It's just going to.
Yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't take a rocket scientist, or it doesn't take someone that's like the most technical engineer in the world. You can just sit there and go, this is out of phase. Okay, what does that mean now? What do I do? You know, or like I learned in analog, so I learned to touch the knob, twist it, turn it, make it do things.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Because my win and doubt is I'm going to turn that down and I'm going to move a button. You never know. You never know until you try it. But a lot of people are scared to do those things too, which is challenging.
I started with analog as well, and I just started, and I wondered what's going to happen. It's just started happening. I've met engineers who have only done digital and only done screens, which is fascinating to me, which makes me kind of wonder, what's the future of this whole? Because I remember I had to tip over these consoles and I've got all these gates and reverbs and having to patch, which helped me understand signal flow and action, but now you've got a different, like, it's cool watching them work because they're a little bit out of the box to where I'm not necessarily used to. And with just kind of my comfort zones and just how I've done step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Sure. But in terms of the future of audio, from somebody else who has gone from analog to digital, where do you see the future of audio going? Ooh. Do you think it's going to be all like, no, you just load up and it's going to do, you don't have to do EQing anymore, it's going to figure itself out? Do you think we're going to be gone, all transducers in the ears? Like,
man.
Or what would you love to see in the future?
I would definitely love to see more automation, like in PA specifically.
Okay.
Because I feel like not all engineers are system engineers, and not all system engineers are mixers.
Yeah.
And I think that would be a huge, huge thing, because that's a big chink in my armor. But at the same time, I think that would be huge, because the PAs are getting better, they're sounding better. Everybody has their preference, but they're all really good. Like, they're all a lot better than they used to be when I first started. But there's always going to be an operator, no matter what. Because every time my artist steps in front of a microphone, I'm there. Because he wants me there. It's not about anything else. It's just he wants me back there, seeing me back there to know that he's covered. That's it. That won't ever go away.
What do you think separates a good audio engineer from a great audio engineer?
Ooh. Oh. That's a tough one. Go ahead.
From him seeing you and seeing that comfortability, I think of that, like, okay, there's a difference between someone just standing here and you standing here and him having that comfort. What separates that from just regular people standing here?
One, I
Other
think,
than just time being with the person.
yeah. I think the first thing is like being in the hot seat enough times to where you can say, hey, I know you've never been in an arena. These are the things you're going to look out for. Hey, we're in this venue. It sucks. These are the reasons why.
Yeah.
Like giving people who don't know things data just makes them better.
So being proactive instead of reactive.
Absolutely. Like I'll do that every day. I go see my artists and I'll say, hey, this is what we're looking at today. And then he'll go, okay, so what does that mean? And it's a learning experience. But also I've had other acts that I never talked to them. You know, it was too big or I wasn't there yet and I didn't have that relationship with them. But you got to give people value for what you're doing. And if you don't, it's a lot more challenging to succeed no matter what it is. And those really great engineers like Toby, like Pooch, like their credit list is so large that they have a lot of credibility when they come in, but then they still have to do it.
Sure.
They still have to do the load and they still have to mix the PA. They still have to do the show. And a lot of those guys get fired too. Yeah. And they're amazing. Like they would take this gig in 2 seconds from me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I've been here and I've done every gig with them this year. It's a big difference.
Yeah.
You know, having that comfortability. But a lot of times it's because of all these other factors that come into play.
I think there's a lot of that proof through fire.
Yeah.
As well, and understand when something goes wrong, what to do. That you can only find out from it happening, and not just it happening. What happens under pressure? I mean, you.
Oh yeah.
How do you handle that? That's really tough.
I had one last year that was horrible. You know, Stagecoach, one of the biggest festivals in the world.
Yeah.
My console died 30 minutes before it started, and I had to go on the house desk and build a mix in 30 minutes, and I did an analog split for Monitor World, so the artist didn't notice a change. And the guys at Rat Sound were amazing. They fixed it. And then I had one guy build part of the console, and I built the other part of the console. And I asked everybody to give me grace. I was freaking out. And they said 5 minutes before, hey, Amazon Prime's going to do a simulcast of your mix. Go. Yeah. Talk about knowing your meters and knowing your artists and knowing everything else and moving as fast as humanly possible. And just asking people to help you. Like, that's what that day was. And I ended up getting a handshake from every single one of those people afterwards saying, I can't believe you did that. That was awesome. You know? Looking
back in your career, what do you think was your biggest mistake you made, and what did you learn from that?
Ooh, I've had a bunch.
You're not perfect? You haven't?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. Let's see. Oh, gosh. I've been in roles that I wasn't ready for yet. That was probably my number one thing. Like I wasn't ready to be that person yet for that gig, but I didn't want to say that. Either I needed the money or I wanted the gig because I wanted the gig. And now I'm really comfortable saying no. Or, hey, that's not my thing. Or I don't have time for that because I have to be with my family. Or, hey, that's not my best yes.
That's so tough because in the beginning you have to say yes to get the work. And then for me, I say yes to everything and I burnt out or went to substances to be able to come off of that. That's what my whole other story of getting sober and having to quit. But that's a tough one to learn how to say no.
Yeah, an old teacher of mine years ago taught me that like you got to give your best yes. And for me, I ask that all the time. I say that all the time. I was like, hey, someone asked me for a gig. It's a little bit lower, but it'd be really great for you. Can you do it? And sometimes I say yes to that. And sometimes I go, hey, this isn't my best yes. I'm really sorry I can't do it.
Well, there's also a balance too of like there's not qualified and also outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah,
as well.
For
sure. Because you won't know until you get into it.
Oh yeah.
So what's your advice to people who are going to be stepping into this position soon and are terrified and they've never been in here? They don't have that experience of time to know that I'm in here, so this means this. I don't know much to be very proactive because I haven't had that experience yet with that. What's your advice to those people?
I would say to get friends who know more than you, friends that you can call, and then spend time learning. as much as humanly possible. If that's standing next to somebody, if that's going on your computer and watching YouTube clips of knowing everything about this desk, you know, that's a big part of it. Because if you don't know what this thing can do and what it's supposed to do, you're already falling behind.
Yeah.
But then also having a list of people that you can say, hey, I need help, no judgment. What am I doing wrong?
Asking questions, I think, is
Yeah, I have no
huge.
problem asking our system engineer, hey, is this terrible? Am I doing this right? Am I hearing something? What do you hear? What do I need to work on? Because we can all work on something. We all can tinker with our snares. We all can tinker with our vocal, like whatever. But having trusted people to say, that's a bad idea. Like getting those people around you and then trying to learn as much as you humanly possibly can all the time. You can't be lazy. Because lazy people and mediocre people, they don't last.
Okay, so to the people who are in the PA du jour or console du jour, and you have to be a master of nothing, or you have to do the SE role as well as the Monrange or the front of house role, and it's tough because, at least for me, I didn't feel like I was very experienced in either one of those. What's your advice to those people that are going through? Granted, for me, it's like learning through that is the best boot camp you ever be through. But going through that is also terrifying because you're walking into, I don't know what the hell I'm walking to, and I don't know if I'm necessarily equipped to be able to handle every situation. What's your advice, or looking back, what really brought you through those and made you to the person that you are now?
Honestly, the biggest thing was knowing the music was everything. Because I knew all the pushes, I knew how it was supposed to feel like and how it was supposed to look. But that's how I got, doing those things is how I got the trust to do it all the time. So we had a Jimmy Kimmel gig this year, and it was huge. It was a big deal. It was my first TV show. I'd never done it. I'd never gotten the opportunity to do that. And the engineer that was in there is amazing. He's got Emmys. He's insane. You know, great engineer. He recorded it, and then we kind of struck a conversation throughout the day. You know, realized we're both cool. You know, it's a good conversation. He takes out all the stuff in his chair that's supposed to sit in the captain's chair next to him. He takes all the stuff out and he pulls it up and says, sit right there. He goes, I don't let everybody sit there because some people are jerks. You can sit there, let's listen. We listened, then he goes, you know what? You know all the pushes and all the solos. We're gonna redo this and you're gonna remix it. And I was with my PM at the time and I was like, oh my God, we have 10 minutes, what do we do? Well, mix the show. Mix the song. And it was literally so like, simple, oh my gosh, go. And it was the coolest thing because we got to hear it back and it was like, that's how it's supposed to sound. And it wasn't because I knew how to use the console, because I did not know how to use that desk. But I knew when to push the fader and why I needed to push the fader. And we had a great experience. And every time after that, we basically replicated it throughout the whole year. Of just trying to be a good person, trying to make sure we're being a good steward to our artist. And then usually it works out for you. But it started in March when we did that, and I'll never forget that. That was like one of the coolest days of my life.
Being on tour is kind of tough. There's a lot of stuff always going on, and it is honestly, I have to remind myself sometimes, it's not real life. And you're in an area that is just, it's not real, and it's tough to get stuck in that and then come back home and then come to this.
Yeah.
And I've known a lot of people who have been stuck in this and not been able to get out of it and have fallen to substances or other issues.
Sure.
So in all the midst of all this noise, how do you quiet the noise and how do you keep grounded in reality while you're out here?
Ooh, well, I have the best wife. That's one thing. My family is a really great support system of knowing me and knowing what I want to do. And then us teaming up for like how that actually works. So like I'm a dad. And as much as I would like to do the 6-month tour of doing it and going all over the world and doing that, I don't do those. I have a 17 to 21 day rule, which means if I'm out for that long, I have to come home at some point. If there's 2 days off, I fly home. And it doesn't matter if the artist pays for it or if I have to pay for it. I go home because that's how me and my wife get disconnected. That's how I miss things at school with my daughter. And so I have that rule. So on this tour, it's been 10 weeks. I've been home 3 or 4 times in that time span. And it was always at the 20, almost at the 21-day mark, almost every time. But doing those things has helped us and her be okay with this, you know, because it's not easy. Like, she's a rock star. She's also works full time, you know, like, so having that is crazy. But then also being able to willingly answer the phone when you can, scheduling those things. Like, I talk to her around the same time almost every day. You know, just getting into those routines that you can do to help you do what you do here. That's been a big one for me, because I learned that from another buddy, Kyle Churnside. He had that rule, and I went, that's a really good idea. I kind of do that, but I don't do that every tour. I need to make sure I do that. And so that's something that now I always do, and I talk about it to people all the time. And that's why I get to go home in 2 days. I'm really excited.
I love that.
Yeah, man.
If people want to follow you and follow your career, where can they follow you at?
Yeah, so Instagram's a really good one. It's just Ben Ivey Productions. They can follow me there.
Or come to a show near you. Come see him.
Yeah.
Poke him with a stick, with whatever artist he's with.
Yeah, for sure. And bring me coffee.
Yes,
That's usually a good
just
idea.
throw it at the console.
Throw it. I don't care
do
if it
that.
gets it wet. It doesn't matter.
Because he knows what to do if it happens, right?
Who cares?
Thanks, man. I appreciate your time.
Dude.